What if the person you hired to scrub your floors was the one destined to heal your broken home? Kansas, 1880. A land where prejudice ran as deep as the prairie roots, and grief could hollow out even the strongest man. I didn't hire you to touch my children, woman. But what happens when the most unexpected person becomes the one thing your family cannot survive without? They said a black man couldn't raise children alone on the frontier. They said a poor white widow had no business crossing the line that divided their worlds. Stay with me until the end to discover how one desperate decision changed two broken lives forever, and why the town was willing to burn it all down rather than let them heal each other's wounds. Before we ride deeper into this powerful story, I need you to take action right now. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Why? Because here at the Black Rancher, we're unearthing the buried stories of black heroes who shaped the American frontier, stories deliberately erased by those who wrote our history books. These forgotten tales of courage, family, and defiance deserve to be told. If you believe everyone deserves to see themselves in America's great narrative, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe now, and let's preserve this legacy together. Welcome to the Black Rancher. Pleasant Creek, Kansas, June 1880. The midday sun beat down mercilessly as Isaiah Morgan surveyed his property from the porch of his weathered farmhouse. At 42, his face carried the deep lines of a man who had seen more than his fair share of struggle. 20 acres of Kansas prairie, a modest herd of cattle, and a large barn made up the entirety of what he called Morgan Ranch, a name that still felt strange on his tongue even 5 years after purchasing the land. "Pa?" a small voice called from inside the house. "When's she coming?" Isaiah turned to see his 8-year-old son James standing in the doorway, shirt untucked and hair uncombed. Behind him, barely visible in the shadows, stood his 5-year-old daughter Ruth, thumb in her mouth, dress stained with what looked like yesterday's breakfast. "Soon," Isaiah replied, adjusting his worn hat. "And you two look like you've been raised by wolves. Go wash up." The children didn't move. They hadn't moved much at all since their mother died in childbirth 4 months ago, taking their newborn sister with her. The house had fallen into disarray since then, clothes unwashed, meals barely cobbled together, dust gathering on every surface. Isaiah could manage the ranch, the cattle, the business of making a living. But the home, that was Sarah's domain, and without her, he was drowning. "Mr. Morgan," a tentative female voice called from the road. Isaiah turned to see a slight woman walking toward the house, a small bundle of belongings tucked under one arm. Her dress was patched but clean, her bonnet shielding her face from the harsh Kansas sun. Mrs. Eleanor Winters, the widow who had answered his advertisement for household help. "You found us," Isaiah said, not moving from his position on the porch. He noticed how she hesitated at the gate, how her eyes darted to the children, then to him, then quickly to the ground. "Yes, sir." The storekeeper gave good directions. Her voice was soft but clear, carrying a slight southern lilt. "Said to follow the creek until I saw the only place owned by a—" She stopped herself, cheeks flushing. "By a Negro," Isaiah finished for her, his expression unchanging. "That's what they call me when they're being polite." Eleanor's eyes finally met his. They were a pale blue, reddened at the edges, a woman who'd been crying recently. "I call people by their names, Mr. Morgan," she said simply. "If you'll still have me, I'm ready to work." Isaiah studied her for a long moment. Eleanor Winters looked to be in her mid-30s, thin to the point of frailty. Rumors around town said her husband had died in a threshing accident last fall, leaving her penniless. She'd been taking in laundry, cleaning for the town's more prosperous families, scraping by on charity and stubbornness. Just like him, she was surviving, not living. "The barn needs cleaning first," he said abruptly. "Been neglecting it since—" He cut himself off. "The children need looking after while I tend to the herd. You'll have your own room at the back of the house, meals included, $1 a week." It was a fraction of what the position was worth, but it was all he could afford. He expected her to negotiate, to walk away, to show some sign of offense at the meager offering. Instead, Eleanor simply nodded. "I'll start right away." Isaiah stepped aside as she approached the porch, noticing how both children shrank back into the shadows of the doorway. "James, Ruth, this is Mrs. Winters. She'll be helping around the place." Neither child spoke. Eleanor smiled gently at them, but didn't push. Smart woman, Isaiah thought. She knew wounded creatures when she saw them. "The barn's that way," Isaiah said, pointing. "Tools are inside. I'll be back by sundown." Without waiting for a response, he descended the porch steps and headed toward the pasture where his cattle grazed. He didn't look back to see Eleanor's face fall as she realized he was leaving her alone with two silent, staring children and a filthy barn as her welcome. "Come on," he called to his border collie, Patch, who had been watching the exchange from beneath the porch. "Got work to do." As Isaiah walked away, Eleanor stood frozen on the porch, her worldly possessions clutched to her chest. Through the open door, she could see the chaos inside. Unwashed dishes piled high, clothes strewn about, a thin layer of dust covering everything. Beyond the children's wary stares, she glimpsed something else. A small portrait on the mantel of a beautiful black woman with a gentle smile, holding an infant. Eleanor understood grief when she saw it. This wasn't just a dirty house. This was a home in mourning. Squaring her shoulders, she set down her bundle and turned toward the barn. "I'll be back soon to fix us some dinner," she told the children softly. "Maybe you could help me find the kitchen things when I return." Neither child responded, but Ruth's thumb slipped from her mouth, and James's rigid posture softened just slightly. It wasn't much, but it was a start. By the time Isaiah returned at sunset, the transformation of the barn was remarkable. The dirt floor had been swept clean, the tools organized on the wall and fresh hay laid out for the horses. Even the ancient workbench, buried for months under saddles and tack, had been cleared off and wiped down. But it wasn't the barn that stopped him in his tracks as he approached the house. It was the sound, a sound he hadn't heard in 4 long months. Laughter, his daughter's laughter. Isaiah quickened his pace, rounding the corner of the house to find a sight that made his breath catch in his throat. There, in the small garden that had gone to weeds since Sarah's death, stood Eleanor with his children. Ruth was perched on her hip, pointing excitedly at something in Eleanor's other hand. A small cloth doll, crudely made but with a smiling face. James was actually grinning, holding what appeared to be a wooden sword fashioned from a broken fence slat. The three of them were bathed in the golden light of sunset, forming a picture so reminiscent of what he'd lost that for a moment, Isaiah couldn't speak, couldn't move, could barely breathe. Then Ruth spotted him. "Pa, look what Mrs. Winters made us." Eleanor startled, nearly dropping the child as she turned to face him. "Mr. Morgan," she said, carefully setting Ruth down. "I hope you don't mind. After I finished with the barn, I hired you to clean, not to play with my children." Isaiah cut her off, his voice harsher than he intended, fueled by a surge of emotions he couldn't name: grief, jealousy, fear. The joy drained from Eleanor's face. "Of course, I apologize." James stepped forward, a flash of defiance in his eyes that Isaiah hadn't seen since before Sarah died. "She made dinner too, Pa. And she cleaned the whole house. And she fixed Ruth's dress, and that's enough, James," Isaiah said firmly. "Go inside, both of you, wash up for dinner." The children hesitated, looking between the adults with uncertainty, before slowly making their way to the house. When they were gone, a heavy silence fell between Isaiah and Eleanor. "Mr. Morgan," Eleanor finally said, her voice steady despite her evident nervousness. "I understand your concerns. I overstepped and I'm sorry. But those children—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Those children are starving for more than just a clean house." Isaiah stiffened. "You don't know anything about my children." "I know what it's to lose someone," Eleanor replied quietly. "My Thomas has been gone 8 months now. Some days I still set a plate for him at breakfast before I remember." Isaiah looked away, unable to meet the raw understanding in her eyes. "The house looks better," he conceded after a moment. "And the barn. You work fast." "Thank you." Eleanor brushed dirt from her apron. "Dinner's waiting whenever you're ready. Just a simple stew, but it's hot." Isaiah nodded stiffly and headed toward the house, pausing at the door. "Mrs. Winters?" Eleanor looked up at him questioningly. "My wife made those dolls for the children," he said. "They're in a trunk in my bedroom. I didn't know how to. I couldn't bring myself to." Eleanor's expression softened with understanding. "I can get them out tomorrow if you'd like. Show the children how to care for them properly." For the first time that day, Isaiah's stern expression relaxed slightly. That would be appropriate. As they sat down to dinner that night, the first properly cooked meal they'd had in months, Isaiah couldn't help but notice how different the children seemed. James was sitting up straight, his face and hands clean. Ruth had abandoned her perpetual thumb-sucking to awkwardly handle a spoon. The house smelled of soap and stew instead of dust and neglect. "This is good," he said after several silent minutes, nodding at the stew. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan," Eleanor replied. "Isaiah," he corrected, surprising himself. "If you're going to be living here, might as well use my name." Eleanor offered a small smile. "Isaiah, then. And I'm Eleanor." That night, after the children were asleep, Isaiah sat alone on the porch, staring at the stars. Something had shifted in his home today. A crack in the wall of grief they'd all been living behind. It frightened him almost as much as it relieved him. From inside, he heard Eleanor moving about, the soft sounds of a house being cared for. She was humming something low and sweet, a lullaby his own mother used to sing. For the first time since Sarah died, the crushing weight on his chest seemed to lighten, just enough to take a full breath. If you're still with me, you're about to discover why this story shocked everyone who first heard it. Before we continue, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to The Black Rancher if you haven't already. We're dedicated to preserving the hidden legacy of black cowboys and ranchers who helped build America against all odds. Our ancestors' stories deserve to be told with the dignity and respect they were often denied in their own time. Help us keep their memory alive by sharing this video with someone who appreciates powerful stories of resilience and unexpected connection. Now, let's return to Pleasant Creek, Kansas, where the relationship between Isaiah Morgan and Eleanor Winters is about to face its greatest test. 3 weeks passed and life at Morgan Ranch settled into a rhythm. Eleanor rose before dawn each day to prepare breakfast and pack lunches for Isaiah and James, who had begun helping more with the cattle. While they worked the land, she transformed the neglected house into a home again. Washing curtains that hadn't seen soap in years, polishing the few pieces of good furniture until they gleamed, coaxing the vegetable garden back to life. Most importantly, she brought Ruth out of her shell. The little girl who had barely spoken now chattered constantly, following Eleanor around the house like a shadow, helping with simple tasks, and proudly wearing the clean dresses Eleanor had mended. It was on a warm Tuesday morning when the first sign of trouble appeared. Eleanor had taken Ruth into town to purchase supplies, thread, sugar, a new washboard to replace the cracked one. As they approached the general store, she noticed how conversations stopped, how eyes followed them with undisguised curiosity and something darker. "Well, if it isn't the Morgan help," said Mrs. Prescott, the banker's wife, blocking their path on the store's porch. "Brought the little one with you, I see." Eleanor tightened her hold on Ruth's hand. "Good morning, Mrs. Prescott. We're just here for a few necessities." The woman hummed, her eyes cold. "Interesting, isn't it? How you've made yourself quite at home out there, living under the same roof as that man." "Mr. Morgan is my employer," Eleanor said evenly. "He's provided separate accommodations, as is proper." "Proper?" Mrs. Prescott laughed, the sound brittle as autumn leaves. "There's nothing proper about a white woman living with a—" "We need sugar," Ruth interrupted loudly, tugging on Eleanor's hand, "and thread for my doll's dress." Eleanor seized the opportunity. "Indeed we do. If you'll excuse us, Mrs. Prescott." Inside the store, the whispers continued. The storekeeper, Mr. Finch, who had always been friendly, now barely looked at her as he filled her order. When he named the price, it was nearly double what she expected. "There must be some mistake," Eleanor said quietly. "Sugar hasn't gone up that much since last week." Mr. Finch finally met her eyes. "No mistake, Mrs. Winters. Prices are what they are. For some people more than others, it seems, she replied, but paid the inflated amount from the household money Isaiah had given her. She couldn't return without the supplies. As they left the store, Ruth looked up at her. "Why was that lady mean to you? Is it because you work for Pa?" Eleanor chose her words carefully. Some people don't understand that families can look different and still be good and strong. Ruth considered this seriously. "Are you part of our family now?" The innocent question sent a jolt through Eleanor's heart. "I work for your family, Ruth. That's a special kind of belonging, but different from being actual family." "Oh," Ruth's face fell slightly, "but you make Pa smile sometimes now. And you know how to braid my hair like Mama did, and you taught James how to make biscuits. Those are things friends do for each other," Eleanor explained gently, though the word friends felt inadequate for what she'd come to feel for the Morgan family. On the walk home, Eleanor felt eyes following them from every porch, every window. By the time they reached the ranch, she had made a decision. She would need to be more careful, create more distance, remember her place. That evening, when Isaiah returned from checking the fence line on the north pasture, he found dinner waiting but Eleanor notably absent from the table. "Where's Mrs. Winters?" he asked the children as he washed his hands in the basin. "In her room," James said around a mouthful of cornbread. "Said she has a headache." Isaiah frowned. In 3 weeks, Eleanor had never missed a meal. She claimed it was to ensure the children ate properly, but the dinner table had become a time when they all sat together, almost like a family. After the children were in bed, Isaiah knocked softly on Eleanor's door. "Yes?" Her voice sounded strained. "Are you unwell?" he asked through the door. A moment passed before she opened it, standing formally in the doorway rather than inviting him in. "I'm fine, thank you. Just tired." Isaiah studied her face in the low lamplight. Her usually warm eyes were guarded, her posture rigid. "Something happened in town." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Nothing worth discussing. People talk, that's all." "About you working here, for me." His jaw tightened. "It doesn't matter," Eleanor said, though her expression suggested otherwise. "It does if it's causing you distress," Isaiah insisted. "I can ride into town tomorrow, speak with—" "No." Eleanor's voice rose slightly, then immediately softened. "Please, that would only make things worse. I can handle a few whispers." Isaiah leaned against the doorframe, suddenly looking very tired. "I should have warned you, should have known what would happen. I'm a grown woman, Isaiah. I knew what I was walking into." Her voice grew stronger, "and I don't regret it. Those children needed help, and so did you." Their eyes met, and for a moment something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of the bond that had formed, against all odds and propriety. "Nevertheless," Eleanor continued, breaking the moment, "perhaps it would be best if I maintained more appropriate boundaries, for everyone's sake." Isaiah straightened, his expression closing. "As you wish, Mrs. Winters. Good night." "Good night, Mr. Morgan." As the door closed between them, both felt the sudden chill of the formal address, a return to the distance of strangers when they had begun to feel like something else entirely. The uneasy tension in the Morgan household stretched into days, then weeks. Eleanor continued her duties with quiet efficiency, but the warmth that had begun to fill the house receded. She no longer sat with them at meals, instead serving the food and retreating to eat alone in the kitchen. The easy conversations, the occasional laughter, the moments of shared understanding, all replaced by polite formality. The children noticed the change immediately. James became sullen, spending more time in the barn with the horses than in the house. Ruth grew clingy, following Eleanor everywhere, as if afraid she might disappear if not watched constantly. Isaiah said nothing, but Eleanor caught him watching her sometimes, his dark eyes filled with questions he wouldn't ask. July brought punishing heat and the threat of drought. The creek running through their property slowed to a trickle. The garden Eleanor had coaxed back to life began to wither despite her careful rationing of well water. The cattle grew restless, congregating in the shrinking patches of shade. It was in this tense atmosphere that Sheriff Taylor rode onto their property one sweltering afternoon. Eleanor was hanging laundry while Ruth played nearby with her doll, Isaiah and James were repairing a section of fence that had been damaged by a desperate deer seeking water. "Mrs. Winters," the sheriff called, tipping his hat as he approached. "Is Morgan around?" Eleanor shielded her eyes against the sun. "He's mending the north fence, Sheriff. Shall I fetch him?" "No need to trouble yourself. I'll ride over." He made no move to leave, instead eyeing the domestic scene before him with poorly disguised disapproval. "Been meaning to stop by." "Heard some concerning talk in town?" Eleanor stiffened but kept her voice neutral. "Oh, folks are worried about you, ma'am. Living out here isolated, with circumstances being what they are." His gaze drifted meaningfully toward Ruth, who was watching the exchange with wide eyes. "Not natural, some would say. I appreciate the concern, Sheriff, but it's misplaced." Eleanor resumed pinning a sheet to the line with deliberate movements. "The Morgans have been nothing but respectable employers. That may be your view now, ma'am, but situations develop." He leaned forward in his saddle. "The town council's discussed it. Reverend Phillips in particular feels it's his Christian duty to offer you alternative arrangements, a room above the church, perhaps, work with proper families." Eleanor met his gaze directly. "Please thank the council for their concern, but I'm satisfied with my current position." The sheriff frowned. "Mrs. Winters, I don't think you understand the gravity." "What can I help you with, Sheriff?" Isaiah's deep voice cut through the conversation as he approached from the pasture, James trailing behind him. His tone was respectful, but there was steel beneath it. Sheriff Taylor straightened in his saddle. "Morgan, just passing by." "And taking time to speak with my housekeeper," Isaiah observed coolly. "Must be important business." The air between the two men crackled with tension. Eleanor instinctively moved closer to Ruth, placing a protective hand on the child's shoulder. "Just community concerns," the sheriff said, "making sure everything here is appropriate." Isaiah's expression didn't change, but Eleanor saw his hands clench at his sides. "My business and my household are my own affair, Sheriff. Not when they affect the moral standing of our town," Taylor countered. "A white widow living under the same roof as a Negro man, with children present no less." "Folks are talking." "Let them talk," Isaiah said flatly. "Mrs. Winters is employed as a housekeeper and nothing more. She has her own quarters and is treated with the utmost respect." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "That's so." He turned to Eleanor. "Mrs. Winters, are you here of your own free will? No coercion?" The implication hung in the air, ugly and unmistakable. Eleanor felt a surge of anger that momentarily overshadowed her fear. "Sheriff Taylor," she said clearly, stepping forward. "I am here by choice, earning an honest wage, doing honest work. The only discomfort I've experienced has been the result of unfounded rumors and prejudice from town, not from this household." The sheriff studied her for a long moment before tipping his hat. "As you say, ma'am, for now." He turned his horse. "I'd be mindful of appearances if I were you, Morgan. Town's on edge with this drought. People look for someone to blame when times get hard." As he rode away, a heavy silence fell over the yard. James took Ruth by the hand and led her toward the house, sensing the adults needed privacy. "You should go," Isaiah said quietly, once the children were out of earshot. "Take the offer. It won't stop at talk." Eleanor turned to face him, clutching a damp shirt she'd been about to hang. "Is that what you want? For me to leave?" "What I want doesn't matter," Isaiah replied, his voice rough with emotion. "What matters is your safety. Your reputation." "My reputation?" Eleanor laughed bitterly. "I'm a penniless widow, Isaiah. My reputation was worth precious little before I came here." "It's different now," he insisted. "This is different. Because of who you are," she challenged, "or because of what I've become to your children?" Isaiah looked away, unable to answer. Eleanor hung the shirt with deliberate care. "Ruth asked me last week if I was part of your family now." Isaiah's head snapped up, his eyes meeting hers. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That I work for your family, that it's a different kind of belonging." Eleanor's voice softened. "But the truth is more complicated than that, isn't it?" They stood facing each other in the yard, the afternoon sun beating down, the distance between them both vast and infinitesimal. Everything unspoken hung in the air between them, Impossible, dangerous, and yet undeniable. "I won't leave unless you ask me to," Eleanor finally said. "Not because of gossip or threats, only if you truly want me gone." Isaiah closed his eyes briefly, his face a mask of conflict. "I don't want you gone," he admitted quietly. "But I fear what staying might cost you." Before Eleanor could respond, a cry came from the house. "Pa, Mrs. Winters, come quick!" They both turned to see James in the doorway, his face pale with alarm. "It's Ruth. She's burning up." In an instant, their personal conflict was forgotten. Together they raced toward the house, united by a more immediate fear. Ruth's fever raged through the night, her small body burning despite the cool compresses Eleanor applied. By morning, angry red spots had appeared on her chest and face. Scarlet fever, the illness that had claimed so many children on the frontier. Isaiah paced the hallway outside his daughter's room, helpless in the face of her suffering. James sat huddled on the stairs, pale and frightened. And Eleanor remained at Ruth's bedside, refusing to rest, refusing to leave. "We need the doctor," Isaiah said, when Eleanor emerged briefly to fetch fresh water. "I sent James to the Petersons' farm at first light," she replied, her face drawn with exhaustion. "They're riding into town to fetch Dr. Wilson." Isaiah nodded, then hesitated. "You should keep your distance. If you haven't had the fever before—" "I had it as a child," Eleanor assured him. "I'm not at risk." She placed a gentle hand on his arm. "You, however—" "I had it too," Isaiah said, "when I was about James's age." A small relief in a sea of worry. They shared a brief look of understanding before Eleanor returned to Ruth's bedside. Hours passed. The doctor still hadn't arrived. Ruth's breathing grew more labored, her small face flushed with fever. Eleanor sang to her softly, bathed her burning skin with cool water, and prayed as she hadn't prayed since Thomas died. It was nearing sunset when the thunder of approaching horses broke the tense silence. Instead of the doctor, however, it was Sheriff Taylor who burst through the door, accompanied by Reverend Phillips and 3 other men from town. "Where is she?" the sheriff demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. Isaiah moved to block their path. "My daughter is gravely ill. If you haven't brought the doctor—" "Not the child," Reverend Phillips interrupted. "Mrs. Winters. We've come to remove her from this situation." Eleanor appeared in the bedroom doorway, her apron stained from tending to Ruth. "I'm not going anywhere. Ruth has scarlet fever. She needs constant care." The Reverend's expression hardened. "This confirms our worst fears. Now she's using the child's illness to entrench herself further in this household." "That's absurd," Isaiah said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Mrs. Winters has been nothing but a blessing to my family." "A blessing?" one of the other men scoffed. "That what you call it?" The implication hung in the air, ugly and unmistakable. Eleanor felt her cheeks flush with anger and shame. "You need to leave," Isaiah said firmly. "All of you. My daughter needs quiet and care." Sheriff Taylor stepped forward. "Mrs. Winters, gather your things. We're taking you back to town for your own protection." "Protection from what?" Eleanor demanded. "From caring for a sick child. From doing the job I was hired to do." "From sin," Reverend Phillips pronounced solemnly. "From the appearance of impropriety that has this entire town talking." "While you're all busy talking," Eleanor shot back, her patience finally snapping. "A child might be dying in that room. Where is Dr. Wilson?" The men exchanged uncomfortable glances. It was the sheriff who finally answered. "Dr. Wilson said he'd come when he could, but he has other patients in town." "White patients," Isaiah said flatly, understanding immediately. The silence that followed confirmed his suspicion. Eleanor turned without another word and went back to Ruth's room, closing the door firmly behind her. "You see," the Reverend said, "defiant, choosing them over her own kind." Isaiah drew himself up to his full height, his expression formidable despite the fear and exhaustion etched on his face. "Mrs. Winters is employed in this household. She answers to me, not to you. And right now she is saving my daughter's life, while your doctor finds excuses not to come." "Now see here, Morgan," the sheriff began. No, you see, Isaiah cut him off. That woman in there hasn't left Ruth's side in 20 hours. She's done everything humanly possible to break the fever, ease her breathing, keep her comfortable. She's shown more Christian charity than the lot of you combined. He stepped forward, forcing the sheriff back a pace. So unless you've brought medicine or help, I suggest you get off my property and let us tend to our family. The word hung in the air. Our family. Impossible, defiant, and true in the way that mattered most. This isn't over, Morgan, the sheriff warned. The town won't stand for this arrangement. The town doesn't have a say in my household, Isaiah replied steadily. Now go. After a tense moment, the men retreated, muttering threats and promises to return. Isaiah watched them ride away before closing and bolting the door. When he turned, he found James standing in the hallway, his young face solemn. "Are they going to take Mrs. Winters away from us?" he asked quietly. Isaiah knelt before his son, placing his hands on the boy's shoulders. "No, James, not if she wants to stay, not if we can help it." "Good," James said firmly, "because she's ours now." The simple declaration, spoken with a child's certainty, struck Isaiah to the core. He nodded, unable to find words. Together they returned to Ruth's room, where Eleanor sat beside the bed, gently singing a lullaby as she bathed the child's forehead. Ruth's breathing was still labored, but she seemed marginally more peaceful. "Any change?" Isaiah asked softly. Eleanor looked up, her eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. "The fever's not breaking, but it hasn't risen either." She hesitated. "I heard what happened, what you said." Isaiah moved to stand beside her, looking down at his daughter's flushed face. "I meant it." Through the long night that followed, they maintained their vigil together. Isaiah brought Eleanor tea, insisted she eat something, even as she refused to leave Ruth's side for more than moments. James curled up in a chair in the corner, unwilling to be separated from his sister. Near dawn, Ruth's fever finally broke. Her breathing eased, and she fell into a natural sleep for the first time in days. When her eyes fluttered open hours later, the first face she saw was Eleanor's, smiling through tears of relief. "You stayed," Ruth whispered, her voice weak but clear. Eleanor smoothed the child's damp hair from her forehead. "Of course I stayed. You're my—" She caught herself, glancing up to find Isaiah watching from the doorway. "Family," he finished for her, stepping into the room. "We're family, Ruth, all of us." The words hung in the air, impossible, defiant, and true. Later that afternoon, as Ruth slept peacefully and James kept watch by her bedside, Isaiah found Eleanor on the porch, finally allowing herself a moment of rest. "The town won't accept this," she said quietly as he sat beside her. "They'll never let us be." "Then we'll go," Isaiah replied simply. "I hear Nebraska's good cattle country. Or Colorado. Somewhere we can start fresh." Eleanor turned to him, her eyes wide with surprise. "You'd leave? Everything you've built here?" "This land, these buildings, they're just things," Isaiah said. "What matters is in that house. James, Ruth." He reached for her hand, hesitantly, giving her every chance to pull away. "And you, if you'll come with us." Eleanor looked down at their joined hands, his large and dark against her smaller, paler one, so different and yet fitting together perfectly. "The children need a mother," she said softly. "And I need you," Isaiah replied, the words clearly difficult for a man unaccustomed to speaking his heart. "Not as a housekeeper, not as a nurse for my children, but as a partner, a wife, if you'll have me." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "People will never understand. They'll make life hard for all of us." "Some will," Isaiah acknowledged, "but others might surprise us. And regardless, we'll face it together." The sunset painted the prairie gold around them as Eleanor finally allowed herself to imagine a future she'd never dared to hope for. Not just survival, but love. A family cobbled together from broken pieces, stronger at the mended places. "Yes," she whispered, squeezing his hand. "I'll come with you, wherever we need to go." Isaiah smiled, a full, rare smile that transformed his weathered face. Then we'll make our own way, together. As the sun sank below the horizon, they sat side by side on the porch of what had become their home, watching darkness fall over the Kansas prairie. Whatever challenges tomorrow would bring, they would face them as a family, unlikely, unexpected, but unbreakable in the ways that truly mattered. And that's the story of how one widow hired to clean a barn ended up healing a family and finding her own place in the process. History is full of these untold stories of courage, of people who defied convention to follow their hearts and build something beautiful in a world determined to tear them down. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to The Black Rancher. We're committed to bringing these forgotten histories to light, the black cowboys, ranchers, and pioneers who helped shape America, often alongside unlikely allies and against impossible odds. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that love can transcend boundaries, that family is defined by what's in your heart, not what others expect. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, this is The Black Rancher, keeping our true history alive, one story at a time.